Hello and welcome, I'm the Rambling Director, and today we are going to be talking about Amsterdam, which I just watched with my fiance. This movie is one of the most star-studded casts possibly ever put to film. I just have to read it because there were so many people I'm going to forget somebody. Christian Bale, Margot Robbie, John David Washington, Alessandro Nivola, Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Rock, Michael Shannon, Mike Myers, Taylor Swift, Timothy Olyphant, Zoe Saldaña, Rami Malek, Robert De Niro, and even Ed Begley Jr. was in there. He just played a corpse, but he was in there for a few minutes. This film was directed by David O. Russell, who directed The Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle. The film is about three good friends who were once inseparable when they lived together in, you guessed it, Amsterdam. However, they parted ways, and all of this is shown to us in a flashback. Harold and Bert are hired to investigate and do an autopsy on Ed Begley Jr.'s character and find out whether or not he was murdered. They're hired to do this by Taylor Swift, and they end up getting caught up in a murder plot and framed for murder, and they have to go and clear their name, and so they're going around this star-studded city trying to clear their name and figure out who was the real murderer. They are also running into that old friend from Amsterdam. I did not know who all was in this cast before I went to see the film, and I was really blown away. When Robert De Niro shows up over halfway through, I was just like, by that point I was like, my gosh, another one? There's so many people in this. Mike Myers and Michael Shannon, you would never think that's a duo, made in heaven, yet they act off each other so much. I kind of want to see like a buddy cop movie with just these two as the stars, and the whole movie revolves around them. In fact, you know what? They need to play their characters from this in a spin-off movie. I liked some of the nods to classic film that we see in this. For instance, the sort of cheesy dialogue, I think, a lot of it seems to be referencing old movies. A lot of it has that kind of, the problems of two people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world sort of vibe to it, if you know what I'm saying. Actually, speaking of Casablanca, they kind of do that. The flashback to Amsterdam, and even the idea of Amsterdam. This film does not take place in Amsterdam. Take a shot for every time I say that word. Amsterdam is sort of an idea. It represents a happier time in these people's lives, one that they're trying to get back to and trying to revive what they had in Amsterdam. Take another shot. Now, if I was a really cynical critic, I would say, oh, this is a very confused movie, and the director didn't know what he was doing, and, all that crappy stuff that critics love to say. However, I don't consider myself to be a critic. I'm a filmmaker, and I just like talking about other people's movies. So it's a review, but only technically. And in this case, I would be a terrible reviewer if I told you something that I didn't believe. If I told you because everybody else was hating on this film, the critic score and the audience score is pretty low. If I told you that I hated it because everybody else was doing it, then my opinion would be worthless. So I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I'm one of those people who absolutely loved this movie. Now, understand, I come from an older school of film. I grew up pretty much exclusively on Turner Classic Movies. 30s and 40s films were my cup of tea, okay? And they still are. So I can watch films like the original Dracula, which, although it's only like an hour and 15 minutes, feels really long because it's written like a play, and so the dialogue is kind of dragged out, and there's a lot of quiet moments, there's no music. I can watch that, and my attention span is just so long that I don't get bored. I've also always had a love of really quirky films. So, like, the Coen Brothers movies, I love those films. And not just the good ones, everybody kind of dislikes, what was it, Lady Killers, I think was the name of it. And I liked that one a lot. I liked the Hudsucker Proxy. That's hard to say, but there it is. The Hudsucker Proxy. This film, I can see how somebody could watch this and get completely lost. It is long, and it is not necessary to be this long. The reason that it goes on for such a long time is not because the plot merits it, it's because these characters love to talk, and there's a lot of misunderstanding each other, and kind of like talking in circles around each other. It has sort of a Big Lebowski sort of feeling. This film is very smart. I mean, I don't know how anybody could deny that, even if you hated the film. It's clearly very smart, and it's doing a lot of intelligent things. If I had to say one real criticism that I think would turn people off, it's that the serious moments are played very quirky, and the quirky moments are played very serious. Some people would say, this movie is very confused, the director didn't know what he was doing, but to me, I see it, and I think this man was so consistent. And listen, I've seen American Hustle, and I've seen The Silver Linings Playbook. This man knows what he's doing. And if he made a movie this quirky, he did it deliberately. This film really does kind of circle around itself. It feels more like a cyclone working its way to the center than it does a line going from A to B. And so, yeah, those outer rings are very wide, and there's a lot going on in them. And then by the time it gets to the end, it's going very quickly. So I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you know this is a whodunit film, then you know the end is going to have the main character kind of wrapping things up and explaining for the audience the things that you might have missed. So Christian Bale does that in voiceover in this film. But it's really funny. He took these drugs at the beginning of the climax to stop the pain in his back because he was a veteran. He was severely disabled by the Great War. By the time they're like, you did all this to start a war. Yes, we did this to start a war. And Christian Bale is just like in an extreme close up, and he's going, did they say start a war? Man, didn't we just do that? If you don't like it, like if you see this movie and you hated it, and you were bored to tears by it, if you thought it was pretentious, I could understand all of those points of view. I just really loved it. Now you can say what you want. Maybe that says something bad about me as a filmmaker. I don't know. I tend to make my movies pretty short. They rarely go over an hour and a half. Could this film have been significantly cut down? Yeah. If you wanted to give this movie a C for story, like a C or C minus, just for the story, then fine. I can understand that point of view. But if you give this anything less than an A for character work, we didn't watch the same movie. The characters are just rad. I mean, they are really good characters. And again, the casting is maybe 50% of that. They're really great characters. It also does a lot of interesting stuff. For instance, Christian Bale is the main character, and his job is making prosthetics for the men who were disfigured in the war. That was a real job. People really did that to fix the faces and hide the deformities of these men so they could go back to living normal lives. Now, of all the people in it, and especially of the main three leads, I think John David Washington was, the best actor, followed by Margot Robbie. I feel like people will be really hyping up Christian Bale's performance, like saying he should win an Oscar. And he was good. He was very good. I like Christian Bale. I've said that already, but I think he's, part of that old school of like character actors, and I love character actors. The issue I have with him is he acts just like Sophia Petrillo from the Golden Girls. I mean, he could be Dorothy's lost brother. From his accent to the way his facial expressions, those weird pauses he takes, he just acts just like Sophia Petrillo, and so it was funny, but I never saw Bert. I saw Christian Bale playing Sophia. I really enjoy the camaraderie between the three leads. I think they are all really great, and their friendship, although very peculiar and unusual, it really is welcome, and it's something that I think is really good. The thing that I think could drive some people away would be the political message, because this is one of those films that's kind of seems calibrated to piss off both sides. It really comes down to where the political commentary it's pointed, but it's not really pointed enough to tell you how it applies to the modern day. And I actually like that, because both sides would look at this and probably get pissed off, and that just kind of shows you that both sides need to work on some things. Now, again, I do think this film could have, and probably should have, been cut down a little bit. Like, Rami Malek gives this weird little monologue about how he likes to birdwatch, And, you know, there was a guy who went into all of these endangered nests and stole eggs just to prove a scientific point, and I think that's the sort of man who would murder this woman. And then later on we find out Mike Myers was actually the guy who did that, and Christian Bale is like, well, you know, a friend of mine told me that he thinks that that's the sort of person who would do this. And it's not a very good red herring, but to its credit, the movie doesn't treat it like it is. They actually act like he's kind of stupid for taking Rami Malek's advice. I can see how somebody might be insulted a little bit with how point by point they explain everything in the end, when a lot of us, I think, could tell who the bad guy was going to end up being and where the story was going. I think there's a couple times it's a little too ham-fisted, especially like there's this guy who's talking about the secret organization and he's using the fake name, and then he just accidentally uses the real name of the organization, and he's like, oops, I meant this. But again, the rest of the movie is actually so quirky that kind of feels like it was just intentionally meant to be that silly. I don't know. Again, I could really see how you would not like this movie at all, but it's just so weird, I kind of have to appreciate it. It's a little bit like any of the cult films that I really love, like Rocky Horror. It's just so weird, you kind of have to appreciate it, even if you don't like it. I'm not going to give this a grade. I know I've done that with a few movies recently, but I'm not going to give it a grade because this is one of those films that it really comes down to your matter of taste so much that I don't really know, unless you like really quirky movies, I can't guarantee you'd like it or not like it. It's sort of like Les Mis 2012. It's one of those films, it's just so weird and so all over the place that you just kind of have to see it and make up your own mind. I would highly recommend you watch it at least once. Give it that. Give it at least a chance and watch it one time. And if you don't like it, then, you know, no skin off anybody's nose. I completely understand. But with that said, I really did love it. And that's my honest opinion. I really enjoyed this film. I'll watch it again. I might buy it. So, yeah. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you in the next one.